Hi, everybody. Um, so this is lecture number 2, class 2, if we were on schedule. And if we are on schedule, it's still class 2. Um, the first week, we focused on talking about the syllabus. We focused on getting onto the Center for Teacher Professional Development and getting signed up for the class. The school district that you'd like to do your field experiences in, and to get that paperwork done immediately so that they can get back with you and let you know when you are approved. And then you will therefore then let me know when you're approved. If it's a school district that needs me to get in touch with them, and there are very few of those, I'll deal with that on an individual basis, and we'll be in touch about that. If you're in my O1 class, you are seeing this second lecture in the same folder that you're seeing the first lecture in. And today we are going to be talking a lot about what our classrooms need to be like, and we're going to be talking about creating a community of learners and what that means, and what that means for you as a teacher, in terms of the culture of the room, the tone that you want to set. We're going to be talking about, it also involves the physical environment. The physical environment in which you learn is very, very important to not only adult learners, but to children. And we will be talking about all of those things today. In this folder, what you will see is you will see Cambourne's Conditions of Learning, and I did ask for you to print that out so that we can talk about Cambourne's Conditions of Learning. Brian Cambourne, who has just written another book about this topic with someone that I know, observed hundreds and hundreds of classrooms, and he in a research kind of way tried to find out what was going on in those classrooms that were the most impactful to children, that created that learning place. And so we are going to talk about that first. So if you've got your handout, please look at that. You will also be able to look at the PowerPoint that goes over the very same information that I'm going to go over today. And then you will also see a PowerPoint that goes over things that we want to make sure that our classroom looks like, feels like, all those things. I did want to bring up once again that this class would not be complete if you were not reading in Responsive Literacy. This is such a fantastic book, and I will be referring to this book quite often, really almost with every topic that I talk about. So in your mind, I want you to think about classrooms that you've been in, maybe as a child or maybe as an adult, and things you noticed that you thought were good, things that you thought in your mind, were really pretty powerful things to see in a classroom. Certainly the classrooms that I remember don't have much to do with what was on the wall or walls. And yet when I became a new teacher, what seemed to be making the biggest statement was who had the cutest classroom, or who could buy enough stuff at the teacher store to have the prettiest classroom. I mean, that was a thing. And certainly I played my part in that. Everyone wants their room to look nice, and We were after, good, positive things for our children in the classroom. But research doesn't really support the cutesy stuff. Okay, and you know what I mean. I mean, there's stuff that really is meaningful that you put on the walls. And then there's stuff that's just cutesy. It's fun to look at, but that's it. And so if we want to create the best learning environment for our children, we want to think about, first of all, Brian Cambourne's conditions of learning. What conditions do we want to make sure are in place before they ever walk in the door? And so I won't go in order, but I will talk about the ones that I think are probably the most important, although every single one of those is important. So if you look on your sheet that you've got in front of you, that hopefully you printed out, one of those is engagement. Now, we all are searching for our children to be engaged, okay? So how do we get our kids engaged, and what does that mean? Well, when children are engaged into the process of learning, it's something that caught their attention, and they want to pay attention to it, and they get themselves to pay attention to it. And along with that is so powerful, is for us to have high expectations that will happen. Okay, so we need to expect children to pay attention. But then we need to tell them the why. Well, because it's going to help make you a better reader or a better writer. Okay, so some of the other conditions that we need to make sure are in our classroom is, one is called responsibility. And it really basically is just what we know responsibility is. In fact, responsibility in the classroom is all about making sure children understand that they are in charge of their own learning. And they are to take care of the classroom. And they are to take care of the books. And they are to take care of the manipulatives. And I always made sure in my classroom that each child had a job every week, and that we changed those jobs every week. And I thought it was a very positive thing in my classroom, and the kids got a lot out of it, and they got a lot of good feeling from it. So I had a class helper, I had a line leader, I had a pencil sharpener person. There's all those things that help a classroom run smoothly. So responsibility is a big one. Another one that I want to talk about that is something I think we didn't think about a long time ago is that if we're expecting children to learn to read, and if we're expecting children to learn to write, we must immerse them in that topic. Now that can mean a lot of things, immersion. But what it mostly means for us as literacy teachers is that they are surrounded by and enveloped by things they are learning. Books. If they're learning to read, they need to have lots of books in the classroom. If they're learning to write, there needs to be lots of things to write on in their writing center. They need to actually be writing, which is part of Cambourne's conditions of learning. You know, we used to do a whole lot of teaching of reading and not a whole lot of time spending in books, which doesn't make any sense at all. And yet we kept on teaching. And some learned in spite of us and some did not. So, and that leads me to the next thing that Brian Cambourne feels is so important, and that is the idea of use. If we're going to teach reading, or writing. The children need to actually be reading and writing. And you will see from the framework, the comprehensive literacy framework that we learn about in responsive literacy, the kids are reading all day long and they're writing all day long. And that is what is called as practice or use. Okay? We also talked about oral language last week. And oral language is absolutely the bedrock. And I hope you read chapter 1, because we want to really focus on, making sure that children not only write about books, but they are talking about books. And if you look in your book, on page 14, page 15, you will see a classroom library. That's definitely immersion. You can see on the carpet on page 15, the children are reading independently. And there is even an anchor chart on page 14 that talks about books that they have shared. There's a list there so that they keep a running list of books they've shared together. Okay. So that you can see in a classroom environment, immersion is so important. If you have your book, I'd like for you to look on page 18. These are classroom libraries. And classroom libraries are level text that children shop from, and they go to the level of text that is is in their easy level. Okay, we don't want to ever give a child a book that's instructional. Well, in instructional, they would be in guided reading with us. If it's too hard, we don't ever want to give them a too hard book. But for independent reading, we want to make sure they're reading it at a level 95 to 100%. Now that will make a lot more sense to you later as we begin to talk about running records and as we talk about guided reading. Because guided reading, there's enough left to teach in a guided reading lesson that the children can almost read it on their own. And we come in and support with our language. But anyway, you can see that the children are practicing, and you can see that they are immersed. Okay. We will talk about the framework. Look on page 23 in your book. Not only is there a classroom library, but there is a school library where the teacher is able to go and pick out books in which she can use in her guided reading lessons. Okay, so that's what those books are. Teachers check them out, take them to the room, and those are for the kids that are put into their instructional level groups. Okay, so you meet their instructional needs there in guided reading. All right. But if you look at all of these pictures in chapter 1, I think you would agree that there are many things in the classroom that you're seeing in this chapter 1 of the kids being immersed in reading and writing. If you'll look on page 28, they did some interactive writing, and that's where they share the pen, and that's what went up on the board. So let me just talk about that for just a minute. So if we're going to create a literate environment, and we want to stay away from a lot of professionally made materials, what we want to make sure that we have in our classrooms are things that the children have written, books that the children have read, books that you have read to them in a special basket, anchor charts. Anchor charts are meant to help you and the children, remind you and the children of what you are studying at the moment. The rule of thumb for anchor charts is 4 for reading, 4 for writing. Anything more than that, it becomes just noise. And that leads me to my next thing. although you will have lots of things on your walls, I want you to think very, very hard about putting too much on your walls. You know that poster that you put on the wall and it's there at the beginning of the year and then it's still there at the end of the year and you take it off the wall and the wall has turned a different color? Those are the things we don't want on our walls anymore. It just literally becomes wallpaper. So once you've moved to a new unit of study, for example, maybe you have done fairy tales for a while and you've got things on the wall or anchor charts about fairy tales, and now you're moving into nonfiction, then you certainly want your anchor charts to reflect that. Anchor charts are made by you, the teacher, but they're not store-bought. They are reflective of your teaching and reflective of what you can refer back to. Boys and girls, as you know, we have been studying fairy tales, and now we're going to make a shift because the teaks are genre related. And so definitely your anchor charts will reflect that. All right. So something that I wanted to mention in chapter 2, which is certainly about oral language, is that there is a phonological system that children must learn. And the new science of reading test that you will be taking has a lot to do with phonics. Okay, phonics, phonological awareness. There are many, the pendulum has swung, and again, in reading, and I will tell you that it does swing back and forth a lot. But what they are referring to when they talk about the science of reading is not only all the good stuff I'm going to be teaching you in this class, but also there is a strong emphasis again on phonics. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, truly, we taught phonics in addition to reading, writing, listening, speaking anyway. But they're putting extra special emphasis on the teacher understanding those rules so that she can properly teach them to children. And we will talk a lot more about the science of reading. So there's a phonological system to oral language. Okay? So you have to be able to hear. And did you know that, not every language has every sound that other languages have? I didn't know that, but that is why it's very difficult as an adult to learn another language. Okay? Now, there's also a semantic system, and that has to do with meaning, the semantics. Okay? Like, does that make sense? Okay? And certainly, there's a visual system, which is learning the letters, and then the phonological and the phonics, which is hearing the sound. And we'll talk a lot more about that as well. But if you refer to page 38, and I will tell you, this shows you the context, the different contexts across the day in which you will be teaching. So, and we will talk a lot more about this as well in class, but certainly there is a time to do interactive read aloud. That's where the teacher is doing most of the work. The children are listening. The teacher is modeling, thinking, and the children are talking to their partner on the carpet. And certainly we use interactive read aloud to expand their language by them talking about a shared experience, and that shared experience is hearing a story. So, and if you look down past that, it talks about shared reading. And we will talk about shared reading. It's a powerful, powerful context for teaching reading. And it really provides a very supportive context for children to expand their language, to expand their learning. It helps children, solve words. It helps children hear new vocabulary. It helps with comprehension. And at the top of page 39, we will go deeper into guided reading. Guided reading is amazing because there is a lot of time. The teacher always goes back to meaning and has a discussion with the children about the story. And because of that conversation about the story, the children are expanding their oral language. And then there's writing workshop, which has to do with drafting, revising, editing, publishing, sharing with the group. Definitely expands their oral language. You know why? Because oral language is talk written down. Okay? And certainly phonics and word study. And we will go into a lot more about phonics and word study and how that's just part and parcel of everything we do across the day. But there's so many ways that we expand their oral language. Good conversations around books. So if you will make sure you read chapter 2, it really talks about, all of those contexts. It will be important to understand that context. We will definitely talk more about what that looks like across the day. We'll talk about why we do it that way and all of that. The other thing I want to mention when we talk about a classroom environment, we want to make sure that children come into the classroom and feel warmth and safety and cared for. And that is part and parcel of, creating a literate environment as well. I always liked when I would speak to children because, I felt like it was important that I look into their eyes when I talked. I made sure that either I was sitting down and looking at them face to face, or I would bend down and talk to them. I would look for the good things in children. And the other way you can, they began encouraging us about the time I retired to stand at the door and welcome them in. Welcome them in. And in addition to that, think of the times that you could read a story, maybe first thing in the morning, about kindness or dealing with feelings or politeness or how we treat each other in this class, because you are building a community. It doesn't take place overnight. It's something you as a teacher artfully build over time. And frankly, you set the tone for those things. So lots of ways to do that. I also wanted to mention, as we're talking about a classroom environment, is that you want to have in a classroom a flow. And what I mean by that is I've been in classrooms where I had a difficult time maneuvering myself around the room. Okay? There was either too much furniture or that it wasn't organized in such a way that I could really get through the room in a flowy way. And so we want to think about how we set up the room. And so we will look at that some more, about how we want to set up our classroom. Oftentimes, it helps us to put their desk together so that at certain times they can work together, they can talk together, and we want to make sure that they can flow. So when you call them to the carpet, either for shared reading or interactive read aloud, or for any instruction that you're going to do on the carpet, that there is a flow to where they don't have to crisscross 40 desks. So you want to look at that. You want to really think about placement of furniture. And I was going to look for, and you want to put books and things around your carpet that are so that they're easily accessible. Okay. So after my lecture, what I would like for you to do is go back into Brian Cambourne's Conditions of Learning. There is a PowerPoint, and it's green. And if you will watch that PowerPoint, it has everything to do with what I've talked about today. That there are certain conditions we want to be in place. Responsibility, engagement, immersion. Now here's one that I do want you to really put up here, because it's going to have to not only do with an excellent classroom, but excellent lesson plans. If we want children to learn, then we must explicitly model what it is we want them to learn. So modeling is another one of Brian Cambourne's Conditions of Learning. We can't just expect them to predict. We have to teach them how to predict. And that's a strategic move. That's a strategic action in the brain. And so we have to help them learn how to do that. And we'll go deeper and deeper into that as well. So what I'd like for you to do, if you haven't done so already, is go through the Conditions of Learning, watch the green PowerPoint on the Conditions of Learning, and then I want you to watch the PowerPoint on Creating a Literate Environment. That goes over much of what I've said today. Okay. All right, I'm going to shift gears just for a minute here. So it's very important that you do the reading that are in the class folders, okay? The class folders are there to guide you through what you need to do for that week. And so the three big topics that I've talked about already are oral language, which is the bedrock of it all. And so we certainly want to expand the oral language at all times through all instructional contexts. I want you to be thinking of Brian Cambourne's Conditions of Learning, things that need to be in place in my classroom. Responsibility, modeling, engagement, high expectations, all those things that make for a good classroom. And certainly creating a literate environment, both in the culture of the classroom, and not only the culture of the classroom, but the layout of the classroom makes a lot of difference. So for the rest of this evening, I need for you to go over those two things. I need you to look at the reader response in class folder 2. Take a look at that and then get that turned in. Reader responses are always due the next week, right before class time. Okay? They're always due. And remember, I really don't expect anything to be late unless I've been talked to about it. Okay? I also need for you to be working on getting your paperwork into the school district in which you would like to do your field experiences, and follow the directions to a T, and then send me an email of which one you're going to do, because I have to turn that information in, not only your district, but your school. And then I have to get paperwork turned in, and they'll let me know when you're approved, and then I can let you know when you're approved. Remember, that is called the Center for Teacher Professional Development. I will also send you an email regarding those issues and specific directions about that. And so kind of got a lot going on. The other thing I need for you to do, as you recall from class 1, is that you need to find a student in K through 2, or I will even let you do pre-K 4, pre-K 5, if need be. You know, you'll learn a lot about a youngster and about how they see the world through literacy. Remember that test, it's a big case study. It's a big part of your grade. It's called the Observation Survey of Early Literacy Achievement. I will teach you everything you need to know to be able to do it. It's not difficult. You just have to stay on top of it. And if you'll follow my guidance on when to do what, you won't have any problem getting it finished and writing it up. Okay? I'm sorry that you can hear my text messages on my computer. If I have messed you up there, I'm sorry. I don't know how to turn that off and still talk to you at the same time. So anyway, if you need any other help, make sure you've checked your class folder. And I do want to make just a general plea is for you to always check your U of H Clear Lake email. Check it every day, because I need for you to get the information. I oftentimes will send you emails to remind you of things, to give you forms that you need, to give you explicit directions on things. And if you ask me a question about it and I've already sent it to you, then I don't understand. Okay, so always check your email. And you can also check the announcement section in Blackboard. Now in Blackboard, I either keep everything in announcements, in information, and in content. Content is by class. Okay? I am also emailing you the class schedule that will tell you whether we are online or whether we are in person. Okay? I'll explain a little bit more about that when I see you in person, about why we're doing things this semester the way that we're doing them. And so please check your email at all times. Okay? All right, so that's it for tonight as far as a lecture. You do have some work to do as far as going over some PowerPoints to make sure you get all the information about Cambourne's conditions of learning and creating a literate environment. Don't forget to read Chapter 1 of Oral Language and follow the directions in your folders as we go. Okay? All right, I wish you well. Let me know if you have any other issues. Reach me by cell or email. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. As we move forward, next class we will be talking about the comprehensive literacy framework and what that looks like and why it is set up the way it is set up. It's pretty brilliant, actually, and you'll be able to go into a classroom and know just what to do to teach reading. Okay? All right, I wish you well, and good luck. Thank you.